Strategic context and the road to Sicily. By July 1943, less than a year before the Allied landings in Normandy, the Anglo-American coalition faced its first true test of unified command in the Mediterranean with the invasion of Sicily, known as Operation Husky. This campaign emerged from the strategic aftermath of the Allied victory in Tunisia earlier that spring, where Axis forces suffered a decisive defeat and more than 250,000 German and Italian soldiers were taken prisoner. With North Africa secured, Allied leaders debated their next move. Some favored an immediate strike across the English Channel, while others argued for further operations in the Mediterranean to weaken Axis defenses and gain operational experience. Ultimately, Sicily was chosen as the next stepping stone toward Europe. The island's capture promised several advantages. It would secure Allied shipping lanes across the Mediterranean, open new air routes for bombing missions deeper into occupied Europe, and potentially destabilize Italy's already fragile political situation. There was also a political motive opening. Another front could ease pressure on the Soviet Union at a moment when German forces were launching their massive summer offensive at Kursk. Although Allied planners hoped the invasion might force Italy out of the war, few seriously expected such a dramatic outcome so quickly. Nonetheless, the decision marked a critical turning point. Sicily would become the testing ground where Allied commanders learned often painfully how to coordinate massive joint operations involving land, sea, and air forces under a single command structure. Deception, planning, and opposing forces to ensure the success of the invasion. Allied intelligence launched an elaborate deception effort designed to confuse Axis leadership about the intended landing site. The most famous of these efforts was Operation Mincemeat, in which British intelligence planted falsified invasion plans, pointing toward Greece on the corpse of a supposed Royal Marines officer and allowed it to wash ashore in neutral Spain. The ruse worked. German high command diverted valuable divisions to the Balkans, weakening defenses in Sicily. Simultaneously, Allied air raids struck Sardinia and other locations to further obscure their true intentions. Overall command of the invasion fell to British Field Marshal Harold Alexander, who led the specially formed 15th Army Group, combining the British 8th Army and the U.S. 7th Army. The invasion force was immense, approximately 160,000 troops, 600 tanks, and 1,800 artillery pieces supported by nearly 4,000 aircraft operating from North Africa and Malta. Opposing them was the Italian 6th Army under General Alfredo Guzzone, consisting largely of static coastal divisions with outdated equipment, supported by elite but understrength German units such as the Hermann Göring Division and the 15th Panzergrenadier Division. Although German troops were officially under Italian command, in practice they operated independently. Despite equipment shortages and heavy losses on the Eastern Front, these German formations remained tactically formidable, fielding modern tanks and experienced officers who would soon demonstrate their effectiveness against inexperienced Allied units. Airborne disaster and amphibious landings. The opening phase of Operation Husky exposed serious flaws in Allied planning and coordination, particularly in airborne operations. On the night of July 9th to 10th, British and American paratroopers were dispatched to seize key bridges and road junctions ahead of the amphibious landings. Poor weather, limited night flying experience, and intense anti-aircraft fire scattered the airborne formations across the island. Many gliders crashed into the sea, drowning hundreds of soldiers before they ever reached the battlefield. The U.S. 82nd Airborne Division, commanded by Matthew Ridgway, suffered similar chaos as transport pilots lost their bearings in the darkness. Despite these disasters, the confusion worked partially in the Allies' favor. Scattered paratroopers launched small-scale attacks that convinced Axis commanders the invasion was larger than it actually was. Meanwhile, amphibious landings began in the early hours of July 10th. British, Canadian, and American troops came ashore across southeastern and southern Sicily, encountering unexpectedly weak resistance in many sectors as Italian coastal defenders abandoned their positions. Key airfields were quickly seized, allowing Allied fighters to operate directly from Sicilian soil. By the end of DE Day, major objectives including the port of Syracuse had fallen. Yet beneath this apparent success lay serious problems. Airborne units were shattered, air support coordination was poor, and German forces were already regrouping for counterattacks that would soon test the fragile Allied beach. Counterattacks, command rivalries, and slow progress as Axis forces recovered from the initial shock. Coordinated counterattacks soon followed. German and Italian units struck at American positions near Gela, briefly threatening to drive the invaders back into the sea. Only decisive naval gunfire and improvised air support halted the advance of German armor. These early battles exposed another major weakness of the Allied effort: strained command relationships. American General George Patton and British General Bernard Montgomery had both criticized the invasion plan from the outset, and tensions between them intensified as the campaign unfolded. Montgomery focused on a direct drive toward Catania along the eastern coast, while Patton bristled at being assigned a secondary role. When Montgomery's advance stalled against strong German defenses around Mount Etna, Patton seized the initiative, launching a rapid thrust westward to capture Palermo. This bold maneuver achieved spectacular results, netting tens of thousands of Italian prisoners and dramatically boosting American prestige. However, it also reinforced perceptions of rivalry and competition rather than unified command. Throughout July, Allied progress slowed as German forces conducted disciplined rearguard actions, exploiting Sicily's rugged terrain. Poor communication, inadequate air-ground coordination, and the inexperience of many Allied units compounded these difficulties, turning what was expected to be a swift campaign into a grinding advance. Political shock and the Axis withdrawal, while fighting, raged across Sicily. The invasion triggered profound political consequences in Italy itself. In late July 1943, Italian dictator Benito Mussolini was voted out by the fascist Grand Council and arrested on orders of King Victor Emmanuel III. The fall of Mussolini marked a historic rupture in Axis unity, though Italy did not immediately withdraw from the war. On the battlefield, German General Hans Valentin Hube assumed effective control of Axis operations on the island, organizing a skillful phased withdrawal toward the northeastern corner of Sicily. His goal was not to hold the island indefinitely, but to preserve combat power by evacuating troops across the Strait of Messina into mainland Italy. Despite relentless Allied pressure, German and Italian rearguards continued to fight tenaciously, delaying Allied divisions town by town. Amphibious Endron landings ordered by Patton helped accelerate the advance, but failed to cut off the retreating Axis forces. By mid-August, Allied troops entered Messina, only to find that the majority of German forces had already escaped. Although Sicily was firmly in Allied hands, the campaign ended not with the destruction of Axis armies, but with their orderly withdrawal, setting the stage for even fiercer fighting on the Italian mainland. Costs, lessons, and historical significance. Operation Husky proved to be a costly but invaluable learning experience for the Allies. Of the approximately 460,000 Allied troops who served in Sicily, around 5,000 were killed, more than 16,000 wounded, and thousands listed as missing, many of them airborne soldiers lost in chaotic drops or friendly fire incidents. Axis losses were similarly severe, particularly for Italian forces, which suffered massive numbers of prisoners and the near collapse of their air force in the Mediterranean. Beyond the numbers, Sicily exposed deep flaws in Allied coordination, communication, and joint command structures. Army commanders complained bitterly about the lack of close air support, while air commanders insisted they were striking more strategically valuable targets. Friendly fire incidents, including the tragic shooting down of Allied transport planes, highlighted the need for better identification measures lessons that would later be applied during the Normandy invasion. With the introduction of invasion stripes and improved airborne planning, strategically, Sicily's greatest impact may have been political rather than military, accelerating the downfall of Mussolini and fracturing the Axis alliance. Although the Italian campaign that followed would prove long and bloody, Operation Husky laid the groundwork for future Allied successes. It transformed the Allies from an inexperienced coalition into a more effective joint fighting force, capable of executing the massive, complex operations that would ultimately lead to victory in Western Europe.